Yeah, Big has given a couple different explanations for what the title of that album meant. He said one thing he said was that his first album was Ready to Die, and so Life After Death references like the album after Ready to Die, so Life After Death. And another explanation is that it could potentially be a Tupac reference, but there, Big really had conflicted feelings. I can't imagine what it must have felt like to be Biggie after Tupac's death, because on one hand, like you mentioned, this was his mentor, this was his great friend at one point, a guy who really put him on in a lot of ways, and he was definitely sad about that.
You referenced in your book that Biggie actually wanted Tupac to manage him early in his career. Isn't that right?
Yeah, exactly. So there's no doubt that Big had love for Tupac dating way back, but at the same time, they were engaged in this blood feud at that moment. And when he heard that Tupac was killed, when he heard that Suge, got a stray bullet, and then later that Suge was headed to prison, he probably also had to feel a sense of relief and a sense that maybe this was going to be over now because my enemy is out of commission. So, but then at the same time, he was maybe like really scared because it had finally come to that. In hip-hop before that, there hadn't been these type of high-profile murders, and nobody really thought it would ever get to that point. And so I'm sure that the Biggie had mixed emotions, but I'm sure he was definitely in fear, and he even said as much.
Yeah, definitely. Oh, yeah, man. You got, on one hand, you're losing a friend, on the other hand, you're losing somebody that wants you dead. Or at least reference to wanting you dead in the song. There's several songs. So he must have. Oh, I always thought too, though, when he went out to L.A., huge mistake, because he thought things were like you said. It was safe. Suge was in jail. Things have cooled down, but he obviously went out there way too prematurely. Do you think he should have maybe reached out to people and tried to mend things before he went out there, or what's the situation?
Yeah, I think I agree. Especially in hindsight, he definitely went too early. I think there were reasons, like you said, for him to think the situation had cooled down, like Suge being in prison, and then Snoop Dogg and Puffy had that sort of like peace meeting. They were on the Steve Harvey show, of all things, and they sort of were patching things up, and they declared that the East Coast West Coast beef was over. So things like that had to give Biggie a false sense of security. But the other thing was that this album was a really big deal to him, Life After Death, and he wanted it to be, the biggest album ever. And he needed to go to L.A. for promotion. He needed to go to the West Coast to do some recording, to do some videos, to go to these awards. It was all part of the publicity plan. So it definitely, in retrospect, it was the bad move. It was a bad call. But at the time, it might have seemed like it was. At the time, I think another part of it too was he was trying to show that there was an animosity. He was trying to show that by being out there, he was cool. He wasn't afraid. But the biggest problem is people like Doug Young, who is NWA's manager, has said that Biggie and them, they didn't play it cool when they were out there. It's not just that they went out there, but when they were out there, they were going to parties, they were being loud, they were being flashy, they were not sort of just being humble and laying low.